Good afternoon, everybody. It's been a long week. Finally got done with the budget. I think we have a budget that we can be proud of, a balanced budget for Missouri that puts Missouri families first. Very proud of what we were able to do on education, public safety, and making sure that all of our essential services were funded. I know a lot of the talk today will be about one of the bills later in session, but I just do want to just reiterate some of the things that we're very proud to do. One was fully funding the foundation formula at $500 million more dollars for the foundation formula, which is a record amount. Making sure that we have raises for our state troopers, and then looking at other parts of the budget. I know, Kason, you'll be interested in some of the funding that we were able to do in preparation for the World Cup, all of the great things that we were able to do in terms of House Bills 10 and 11 for health and mental health in the state, of which the minority party members were very complimentary of the things that we did and of the process that we had, and of our budget chairman. I stand here today very proud of Representative Deaton and what he was able to do, and really happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Do you guys have any questions that aren't budget related? Because there's been a lot of things that happened this week, and then I'd really like Representative Deaton to give us his thoughts on the budget.
What are a couple of things that you're looking forward to next week to passing?
Well, there are a number of bills out there. I still think there's hope for the things that we've mentioned before. I'd love to see open enrollment get done. I'd love to see some of the tort reform bills that we have get done. I think people at this point are always asking, are certain bills dead? What I've been telling people is that nothing's dead until Friday at 6 p.m. So we'll be working hard next week. I don't know what the Senate will look like, but we will be here every day working and up till 6 p.m.
What about bills on the House side that would, in theory, not need, any more Senate input? It's something that's in your hands.
Yeah, if I look through the calendar, I'm trying to think of some of the things that we have. Let's see, what do we have?
Sunset bill?
SB 10, we do have that. I think that's on the calendar. I think that'll be brought up. I would like to see that get done so that we don't have to worry about renewing the FRA every 2 years, every 5 years. That's one of the ones on the calendar. Yeah, there's a number of them out there, and we'll work through those and see what we can get done.
How are you feeling about minimum wage at this point and abortion?
Well, I think those are both over in the Senate right now. I'm very hopeful that a compromise could be reached on Proposition A. I still believe that's one of the most important things we can do for businesses. I hope a compromise can be reached, but we'll see on that. And I do think the Senate will, of course, take up the HJR 73 and try to get it done.
Are you planning on adding an amendment to SB 80, which is the Clay County Sports Authority legislation?
I don't have any plans for it right now. It's on the calendar, so it's up to the majority leader to bring it up. I can't stop members from placing amendments on it, and I haven't seen any that have been filed, but yeah, that could certainly be amended.
Is that, in the whole Chiefs and Royals debate, is that bill a bill that has to get done this year?
I don't think it has to get done this year, but I think having that sports authority in Clay County would be very useful if the Royals did decide to move to Clay County. And I think that's, as I've said before, that's one of the most attractive options that they have. So I'd like to see that get done. It also has the amateur sports tax credit, which we really need if we're going to be able to have NCAA tournaments. So I would like to see that bill get done.
Patterson, I have a budget question for you. House Bill 19 was not brought up. Was that done by mutual agreement with the Senate leadership, or was that a House decision on its own?
No, I don't think it was done with Senate agreement. That was a House decision, and I fully support the budget chairman in bringing up the bills that he feels are appropriate and not bringing up the bills that he does not feel it's appropriate to bring up.
So the governor usually decides which items in a budget shouldn't be funded, and then the legislature gets a chance to revisit that in September. You've taken dozens of projects, a reactor at the University of Missouri, a mental health hospital off the table by not doing that. In my experience, there's never been a budget bill poised for passage like this that was not brought up. There's only 1 year that I'm aware of where budget bills didn't make the deadline of Friday the week before the Are you disappointed or in any way that you all have not completed all the appropriation bills that you had ready for passage?
No, I think it's the job of the General Assembly, it's the job of the House of Representatives to pass the bills that they feel are appropriate. And if they don't feel like they should be passed, then it's the duty of the House of Representatives in each body to pass the bills whether they think they should be passed or not. I do think there is a historical precedent for this. I think in 2017, House Bill 19 wasn't passed. So,
Does this damage the relationship with the Senate expecting this bill to be passed and then it not coming up?
no, I don't. I think our relationships with the Senate and Senate leadership are still good. I think we'll continue to work with them. This is all part of the process. When they send us a bill at 11 o'clock before the deadline, I think one of the options they know is that it won't be taken up and passed. So I don't see this as hugely damaging. I think we'll talk more, and this might have effect on future year budgets. But this isn't some sort of a statement or trying to get at anybody. It was just a matter of, do we think it's appropriate to bring up the bill and pass it? And ultimately, the budget chairman did not think it was right to pass, and I support him 100% on that.
So it has nothing to do with the fact that the Senate prevailed on twice as many budget individual lines in conference as the House?
No, and we don't think about Senate positions and House positions. We think about positions for Missouri. I think probably had more to do with we sent them the bill on the 17th, and then we received the bill back with about 6 hours left. I'll let the budget chairman talk more about that, but I expect our relationships will continue to be good.
You mentioned all those bills that you view as priorities that are over in the Senate. Does this move today imperil any of those bills and the likelihood of them passing now?
I don't think so. I think the Senate and the leadership has been great this year. I have nothing but great things to say about how the Senate's been working this year. I think they'll continue to work like that. We'll be in communication with them. There's a number of priorities for both sides that I think could get done, and we'll just work next week on those.
So why didn't you like HB 19? Was it too expensive? Did it make the budget too big? Representative Keaton?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and I'm happy to answer it. And before I do that, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me, and just to reiterate and kind of expound upon the comments of the speaker today, extraordinarily proud of the work that the House has done, the General Assembly, and that we've passed the operating budget for fiscal year 2026 that funds essential state services, that funds state government, funds and provides for all state employees up to a 10% raise on July 1 if they've been in state service for 20 years. And it's capped at 10% for 20 years. It's 1% every 2 years. And then that'll be presumably available going forward as well. So that's really great for our state employees. And you look, at House Bills 2 through 13 and then 17 that we passed in the operating that we conferenced on this week, that we're in negotiations with our Senate counterparts on, as the speaker alluded to in House Bill 2 and public education. We, made historic investments both in our K-12 traditional public schools, in more newer school choice type options as well, with the $50 million in ESAs, fully funding the governor's recommendation there. Of course, that was in House Bill 12 because most scholars program is a statutory program within the state treasurer's office, which is where that funding is provided. But that is education related, will be available for students, needy families across this state, for scholarships, for educational purposes, and that is unprecedented and historic and has never been done before. And I'm very proud about that and the House position there in that regard, and being able to have that included, as well as being able to, as the speaker suggested or stated accurately, that it is a historic amount for public education and the foundation formula. He didn't mention we also increased the transportation funding for K-12 public schools, nearly $20 million there to fully fund that formula that's in statute that provides up to, I believe it's 75% allowed to be paid of, if so appropriated, of allowable school transportation costs. There was another House position that we ultimately did take related to public education for $10 million for deferred maintenance to set up a seed fund to be matched with private dollars for a revolving type loan program, hopefully for charter schools, initiative that's been done in other states, in Arkansas, for example, and charter schools, as I believe most of you probably, if not all, likely know, that unlike our traditional public schools that have statutory authority to bond, to go out to market for bonding, charter schools do not, and so that's not something that's accessible for them, and they do have facilities though, and deferred maintenance and facility costs and obligations, and so this is historic in that way too, that this has never been done before, and this will allow them to, provide some maintenance and funding for facilities for charter schools across the state, so I think that's very good. As well in House Bill 4 and the Missouri Department of Transportation, we funded, I think, over 20 House items that were inserted in the House relating to specific road projects all across the state, including 20 million additional new dollars for rural roads. And there's actually been a lot of confusion about that and that I've heard. And so if you can help me to the extent you wish to report on that, and I hope you will, it's been suggested that the House or the Senate or ultimately has reduced the amount that the governor asked for, or that so what happened was the governor recommended $100 million in House Bill 4. That was the governor's recommendation for rural roads. But that was actually a reappropriation recommendation that he placed in House Bill 4 for what was appropriated in FY25 for rural roads, which was $100 million, okay? There's about $60 million of that left to be expended that MoDOT does not think they're going to be able to get out the door with the construction season in fiscal year 2025. And so the idea was we want to make sure those projects get done as it relates to that $100 million that was appropriated in House Bill 4. But it was causing confusion because people were looking at it in 4, and as in the last years, they were thinking it was a new $100 million, and it wasn't. It was the remainder of the $100 million that we first appropriated in FY26 that was now being asked to be appropriated again in FY27. So the House position, which was agreed to, it wasn't even conferenceable, it was agreed to in the Senate position as well, and what we're sending to the governor's desk is we took that $100 million that the governor recommended. We didn't cut it. We did reduce it out of House Bill 4. We moved it to House Bill 17. If you go and look, there's $100 million there for rural roads that was not there before, and that's to fully expend the amount left to be expended in FY26 that doesn't get out the door in FY25. And then we came back in the House and we put in a new $20 million for rural roads. So having said all of that, what's the number for rural roads? And then the Senate reduced that $20 million. We conferenced and we took the House position, $20 million. So at the end of the day, what sits on the governor's desk now between House Bills 4 and 17 for rural roads is $120 million in appropriations. I hope that's clear. I know it is somewhat esoteric and hopefully not too terribly confusing, but I have seen some confusion about that, so wanted to clear that up. But a lot of road projects, again, that weren't funded through MoDOT's regular process and through the State Road Fund, that we, again, added general revenue to the budget in the House to fund projects across the state, and we took the House position on nearly all of those, and so, happy to include those as well. And going through, you look in our social services budget that we passed the governor's desk today, House Bills 10 and 11, mental health. We funded about $100 million utilization DI for the growth in the waiver programs that the Department of Mental Health has for the development of the disabled population, and funding for Medicaid and House Bill 11, additional new funding for the growth in that program, providing for the vulnerable and the needy Missourians, and so all of that is accounted for in all those bills, and the state operating budget, which we again were conferencing on and did send to the governor's desk. Now, your question, please remind me, about 19, but specifically, I want to make sure I answer it correctly.
Why didn't you pass it? And just to add to that, Representative Fogel, I think, suggested that one of the reasons may have been that since we fully funded the education formula, that the budget then became too expensive, and that's why it didn't.
Well, no, I wouldn't say it's the fully funded the formula in a vacuum. Again, the whole budget fits together. So it's about a $50 billion budget and the general revenue. It's not any one thing. And so the House position, we did just support the governor's recommendation, which was an additional around $200 million, the foundation formula. And then the Senate position, which we conferenced to, was an additional $300 million. So it's about $500 million in total. And I mean, that certainly is. There's sustainability questions around that if that's every year. and considering that. But it's really all the, general revenue we added in totality. I was very clear to my caucus members in the negotiations, this week and earlier. The House budget that we sent, the operating, and including what we did in the CI bills, which we sent the operating over, I believe, on the 3rd of April, is when those made it to the Missouri Senate on the operating. We were at $1.9 billion that we would be leaving on the bottom line. The governor's recommendation with his budget for fiscal year 2026 that he revealed at the State of the State left about $1.3 billion on the bottom line after governor's amendments. And then, the Senate budget was something less than that. I forget the, exact number. I think quite a bit, significantly less than that, especially with the substitute on House Bill 19, additional general revenue was added there. And so I was pretty clear that although we liked our House budget, obviously, as everybody is partial to their own version of something, you understand you have to compromise and there's give and take. I think after 19, the numbers I saw today with the Senate budget entirety left something near 600 million, a little less than that, 550 million or so on the bottom line. And so, pretty big difference. And I was clear, all along, and what I told our caucus, Monday when we met with them, that I thought, well, of course, we'd love the House budget and $1.9 billion, and we felt good about that, and trying to, make sure we continue to focus on the fiscal sustainability of the state and going forward, and, preserving some of this general revenue as we continue to, face the next several years. And draw down the balance that has been accumulated here over the last few years, that's important. Somewhere, between $1.9 billion and the governor's recommendation of $1.3 billion leaving on the bottom line, felt would be appropriate. And with what we did in the operating, the way that this week went, and it was very dynamic and hectic, and things came together late breaking. I only, after the conference and the late developments with what we did spend money on, which I did, as you noted, and that was one item I did in even the public conference committee we had. I made mention several times that, and we maybe took a different position, but I said, hey, I not that this thing is not worthy of doing, but, am concerned about, the fiscal implications, and I think we do need to keep that in mind. And it was only about 3:30 this morning that I was informed of what the balance would be with what we conferenced to. And with what ended up coming back with the Senate version of 19, and again, we didn't have the opportunity to conference on House Bills 18, 19, and 20. So that's a difference from the operating. So usually, the normative process is we, are able to conference on the bills or at least negotiate them. And we, hadn't had any communication about House Bills 18, 19, or 20 as far as what we thought about or any differences that might be established. But if we were to have taken up and passed House Bill 19 today, which I wish we would have and could have, felt like we could have, we would have been at under $1 billion, around $900 million on the bottom line. And just real quick, with not taking up and passing 19, which I chose not to do in conjunction with the full support, correct me if I'm wrong, Speaker Patterson, and talking to Floor Leader Alex Riley, and not going to that bill. Now, we are at about $1.3 billion on the bottom line. And so I regret, we spent a lot of time working on House Bill 19, put a lot of good things in there. The governor had his recommendation. I think we added, some amount of general revenue, a little more, I believe, than $100 million was added in the Senate that we hadn't really had an opportunity to see yet. And so it was about $320 million in general revenue that was in House Bill 19. And again, these are for capital projects. This is not for the operation of state government as far as year-to-year operations. As was noted by the Speaker, I believe it's the last time under now a state auditor, former Budget Chairman Scott Fitzpatrick, House Bill 19 was not passed, and there was no extraordinary session or anything of that regard. And so these are building projects that wouldn't be stood up for another year. But again, we had many things in there that we thought were good and worthy of doing and would have liked to have seen done. But considering what we spent in the operating, just felt like we couldn't move forward at this time. And I also mentioned to my caucus and members, I told them, and they had great concerns, that I would try to be fair to them and not ask them to have to vote on something that they hadn't had an opportunity to review and have input on, or that the House didn't have an opportunity to have any discussions or back and forth on, to see what we thought was most appropriate.
Wednesday morning, when the Senate Appropriations Committee worked on those three bills, the Senate Appropriations Chairman said that he had had talks with you, that as long as they didn't take out anything that the House had put in, you all would take the things that the Senate was going to add, as though he had cleared these $95 million of additional projects with you. Was the Senate Appropriations Committee Chairman lying at that moment?
I don't know, Rudy, what was said in the committee. I wasn't there, didn't hear it. I won't comment directly on that. I'll just say that we didn't have, we might have talked at, brief moments over the last week or so about House Bill 19 at one point or another in just generalities. I don't believe there was ever any agreement, and certainly not that we would just take anything if our insertions were not taken out, because again, there has to be some equity at some point, as we added, and I forget what the number was, if it was $60 million or, where they added over $100 million. But we talked about it in generalities, and again, I would certainly have always hoped. I did ask about, the potential to conference on House Bill 19, and, obviously with the timeline as it was, and once the bills got back to us today, I guess I could have moved to go to conference, but clearly, I'm not even sure. They might have already adjourned by that point, and there's clearly not time, which is, again, unfortunate. We didn't have direct discussions about, what we put in or what they were putting in about, the direct specific items. But again, I wish, we could have gotten to a place to where we, could have done it, but just with what ended up and with the timeline, didn't really understand what the totals of the operating were and what the balance would be until this morning. But unfortunately, just felt like we, again, couldn't move forward at this time.
Did
The
you at
House
any
is
point
this
during
bill
the day
dead, or is there
inform?
potential for a special session on this? Is it dead?
I'm sorry.
Is HB 19 and all that funding just dead, or could there be a special session on it?
So I believe it takes 2/3 of the members of the House and the Senate to call a special session for any purpose. I believe the Constitution says any appropriations bill in a regular session has to be passed by 6 p.m. today. So for this session, it is, that couldn't be taken up again because we're adjourned till Monday. The General Assembly, for a policy consideration or any consideration, if 2/3 sign a call, and my understanding is, to go brush up on the Constitution, I believe can call us into a special session, and then the governor can call an extraordinary session of the General Assembly, of course, at his prerogative.
Speaking of the Constitution, yesterday, Representative, you were asked in committee about the funding for the empowerment scholarships, what allowed you to do that, and you said, well, now House Bill 12, I believe, is where that money actually is. Is that not governing through the budget to allow that public taxpayer money to private school vouchers?
So Most Scholars is a statutory program. There is a state law that establishes the Most Scholars program, and it's a RISMO, and that program is delineated there. And as it relates to the budget, that's generally how this process works. We stand up a program or an initiative in statute, and just about any bill we pass, and look at the fiscal notes, there's fiscal implications, and you can pass a law, but it takes money behind it so that's not uncommon that we would then come back in the budget. And actually, oftentimes we stand up grant programs, for example, in the budget that there's no statutory language to attach to. And that happens every year. But in this case, there is a statute that establishes the Most Scholars program. It's an ongoing program that's relatively new, but has been very successful and growing. And this is funding that the governor recommended, language in the bill that the governor recommended, referencing the statutory program, putting money behind it. So it's a very normative process in that way, even though that this is a new decision item and the first time that it's in the state budget and House Bill 12 for the Most Scholars program.
Getting back to House Bill 19, the House didn't send over 18, 19, 20 until mid-April. Does that give the Senate enough time to go through it and get to the point where there is going to be a conference? Do you think that's a crunch time considering the rest of the bills were given in early April?
I let them speak to that if they so choose. I do think, with the timeline and, House Bill 18, 19, 20, not the operating, 18 and 20 weren't really changed. So we're really just talking about 19. It certainly can be moved pretty quickly. And we had to cut it loose because we were, once we passed the budget over, we can't touch it anymore, we can't work on it anymore. And with the, kind of the movers issues and not getting the governor's budget till, close to the 1st of February, we were under a very condensed time frame as well. And so initially, I had intended and hoped to pass all the budget bills out, including the capital improvements bills, which again is different than the operating budget. I think that's a distinction we need to make. We're going to come back in a year or two and not pass House Bill 20. And I wonder if we'll get a question about that. We didn't pass House Bill 20. So these are bills that you don't necessarily see every year. And again, there's some precedent for that. And it's not, again, the funding of essential state services, of programs, of state employees. These are different bills. So it is a different category. And it's also not unprecedented that the House has sent over the operating first and sent these bills a little bit later. That's happened in recent years. And generally what has happened, in my experience, in those recent years, even when that has happened, there are negotiations with the Senate about what will ultimately be included, especially if we're just going to take up a Senate substitute, in the same way that I know they would find it disagreeable if I sent a bill over, a budget bill, at the very last minute and, without able to, have discussions or conversations about, well, we might like to, add something, or if it's too much money or too little money, or, we're not sure, we want to talk about it. So it's important to have time for those considerations and discussions. I think, with when we sent it over, that it was certainly possible. It became very challenging this week just because things, just as they went, we got, later and later and having to get the operating done, and it just became where there, ultimately weren't time to have those conversations about 18, 19, and 20, especially considering, I think, the Senate substitute was out Wednesday, and then, a Senate substitute today that I still, frankly, didn't get to, hadn't had a chance to review yet. I'm not sure exactly what changed there.
So when did you inform Senator Huff that you wouldn't be taking up House Bill 19 for final passage?
Yeah, we've not discussed it again. I've not seen him since.
So you did not send him a message from the floor that you weren't going to do that? Any kind of message, any kind of letting him know, hey, by the way, we aren't going to do that? Yeah,
again, we talked Monday and spoke about, that I thought we needed to be at $1.3 billion on the bottom line. And I know he understood that. I'm not saying whether he agreed to that number, or I don't want to put words in his mouth. So, yes, I know, but I said, $1.3 billion is what, probably where we needed to get to and what I was comfortable with, and I think what the House would be comfortable with. And the way the process went, with, ultimately when we got to the conference committee reports on the operating being produced and signed, I only became aware of what the bottom line number was at 3:30 this morning, and got in here and, did the operating. And so, unfortunately, weren't time for a lot of discussions.
There was
Why that number? Why 1.3 billion?
Again, I thought it was a fair compromise because of where the House was at 1.9. Again, I think the Senate with their CI, if we would just pass the Senate version of the budget in totality, just like if we passed the House version of the budget in totality, we'd be at 1.9 billion general revenue bottom line, with a fund balance, rainy day fund for next year to help us, continue to have a fiscally sustainable outlook. We were at 1.9. The governor was at 1.3, and I think the Senate after today, if we'd taken up 19 and all the other Senate bills as, just as the Senate version of the budget, it was less than $1 billion, 550 million, 600 million, something like that. And so in my mind, it was a fair compromise, and it was the governor's number. And, his budget that he released to the state of the state, that's what he proposed leaving on the bottom line. Was $1.3 billion to take us into the future, to help us sustain the budget and the outlook into the out years. And again, seemed like a fair compromise, seemed appropriate, all things considered.
There's $1 million more in the governor's budget for personal service than the governor asked for in the original budget. What does the governor want this money for? He didn't get any new FTE, so it works out to about $27,000 per staffer, at least staff slot if they were all full. Why did you agree to?
Yeah, I don't know if you caught my comments on the floor on House Bill 12. I actually had a pretty long explanation about that. And it didn't make it in the governor's recommendation, but he did, talk to House leadership, and I'm sure Senate leadership as well, and kind of asking for that. And I think, my understanding is they want to, engage the private sector, and a lot of this will be volunteers, experts in their fields, CEOs or CFOs or CIOs that have some expertise, and they could come advise on some area of state government for efficiencies or ways we might be able to consolidate or cost-cutting measures without, hurting vulnerable populations or cutting services. Similar kind of a Doge effort on the state level with what the federal government is doing, and that this would be used for cost related to that, not necessarily for making these people employees of the state, but for transportation or incidental expenses and travel and things like that. Any expense and equipment that would be needed or involved to make that effort successful. And it seemed like a really innovative and great idea and initiative, and so I was certainly supportive, and that was never a conversation I had with anybody in the Senate, but it sounds like they were supportive as well. They included it, and I was proud to support the governor on that and his office and that initiative, and I am excited to see what they're able to do with it, and if they're able to stand that up, and I hope that they're successful, because we certainly do need efficiencies in state government, and we try to do that. I think we have a committee on government efficiency, and of course we have the oversight and the legislative branch of government, but the executive is of course the one executing these programs and has the staff under them. So I think they're in a unique position to make this so, and to find efficiencies and to implement them as well. And that, comes necessarily with the power of the executive. And so I am glad that they're interested in this, and I appreciate where the governor's coming from here. And again, I hope he's successful, and I certainly, and I think the House, we very much want to support that effort.
Why not put it in the E&E line instead of the personal service line?
Yeah, that's, I believe, how it was asked for, by the governor's administration. It's somewhat unique in state government. I think they have nearly inherent 100% flex, so it'll enable them to do really whatever they need to do.
With House Bill 19, it's not just what the House wants, what the Senate wants, it's what the governor wanted. So how would you react if Governor Kehoe were to ask for a special session to restore some of this and, basically do a new budget bill to get some of those 19 priorities through?
Happy to have those conversations. I mean, I'm but one person. If you don't have people behind you, you're not a leader. You're just somebody out taking a walk. And so, I'm responsive and responsible to my caucus and to the Missouri House. So I don't want to speak out of turn. But certainly, and if I had known how this was all going to go, there's some important things in there the governor has, and even some non-general revenue funding. I wouldn't have changed the bill at all and just send it over there and hope that we could have passed the governor's budget just as is. So would be very open to that conversation if he felt it necessary. I'm not sure that they will want to move forward in that regard, but certainly happy to have that conversation if the governor felt it necessary, and would look very, certainly look favorably upon that as well. We just have to be careful, obviously, with the amount of general revenue we're spending going forward, and that's going to be more important each and every year. So thanks, everybody.
You talked about the fund. Is it a new fund for charter schools?
Yeah, so it's...
Okay, so I'm curious if our schools for the severely disabled, would they be able to access this money as well, because they can't go bond out like charter schools cannot?
So those are state-owned institutions and operated institutions. So we provide funding through the state budget for those facilities, and the maintenance and repair. It'd be like, House Bill 18 that we just, passed. And so that type of funding would be provided by state dollars in the, state budget for those state-operated schools. I'm glad you mentioned that one thing, and it was, good on the Senate. I think it was very necessary. We do have state-operated schools for the severely handicapped, the blind, the disabled, that are state-operated schools that not everyone realizes, and for I believe the deaf and the blind, these are very important, and they're state-operated schools. So it's not a local school district, it's a state-operated school, and the Senate included a specialized pay plan for those employees of those state-operated schools, and it was a little less for administrative staff and others, but it was a 15% increase for teachers at state-operated schools, and that was a Senate position, and again, I think we were happy to accommodate that and take that position, and I think that was something that I'll give them credit on. Again, it was a Senate position, but proud to have that included in what we sent to the governor's desk in House Bill 2. So
It's going to affect the relationship with the Senate for the last week, this decision to not pass 19.
again, I think the speaker answered that question, so.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Happy Mother's Day.